Greetings, greetings, greetings. I have wonderful news, everybody. Wonderful news. I recently just spoke with the gas station people across the street, and they sold me many IPAs, as you can see back there. They sold me many IPAs for very cheap, cheap.
Many IPAs for very cheap, cheap. Many IPAs for very cheap,
Oh,
cheap.
man,
Many IPAs for very cheap, cheap.
okay, I'm just sending this link around. Send this link around. Getting that link right around town. Sitting that link around. Whoa. There was an automated way to do this. The technology has only come so far. Technology has only come so far. You know, the reason I like this book so much is Ben Counter. He has kind of this terrible his fucking his plot arc isn't like the best because it seriously reaches its pinnacle like right after the exposition. Like right after the exposition, that's when it's really just it's the world building. That's the best part about his writing is the world building. But unfortunately, he always has to introduce a protagonist, right? Because it just the world can't just be sterile by itself. There has to be unfortunately it has to be a setting. It can't just be its own thing. But what I like about this book so much is we are about 196 pages through and it's just still going so strong. All right, the difference between Alric and Lysander, really, like the difference in just the story is Lysander already by this point in any of his books, he's already just decimated every foe, and he's on like the winning side now. That every battle's trivial, but Alric is still on the losing side, and that's what makes it. He's leveled up a couple times. He got some cool armor. He made a powerful. He's made some powerful allies, including an insidious Eldar and a congregation. Um, so yeah, let's check in with Alric and see what he's up to. The Nalator drew a sword from his back, a short curved blade, like a shining razor in the candlelight. He stabbed it into Alric's back. The Nalator knew the ways in which a human body could be made to feel pain. The tip of the blade hit just the right point, and nerve endings caught fire in agony. Alric could not move, only spasm on the altar as pain washed through him. He fought it. Vanalator pulled the blade out and let Alric slide to the floor. Vanalator flicked the blood from the tip of the sword onto the altar, and it smoldered there, the brass icon of Khorne glowing in gratitude. I will not kill you, Justicar. You are too valuable to me in the arenas. As there is still some use the Blood God can get from you. Just because you refuse his will does not mean that he will be denied. I will just have to break you first. In the long run, it makes no difference. The slavers entered the room. Alric fought them for a while, throwing them aside, dashing them against the floor, and snapping their insect limbs. But slowly, their shock prods found their mark, and he was forced down to his knees, still fighting. The Nalator watched. They were all voice scaphulids to be enslaved, and there was no need to risk damaging his valuable gladiator. Alric fell onto his hands and knees, and a shock prod was forced down his neck, above his iron collar, so his face was pressed against the gravestone floor. I know what you are, Grey Knight. I know about Gargoloth and Chasernia, about Valinov and Thorgal Quintus. I know what you can do. None of it will help you now. The scaphulids swarmed over him like ants over a corpse. They manacled his limbs and feet, and turn him over to carry him on their shoulders. "Take him below deck," said Vanalator. One of the Scaphids, particularly old and gnarled creature, had stood aside from the fracas. He turned to Vanalator as Alric was carried, still struggling from the feasting chamber. "Below decks, Duke?" asked the creature. It had practiced the language of humans for so long that its mandibles pronounced each syllable almost perfectly. "You heard me, slave master. Do you mean that?" "No. To the cell block," snarled Vanalator. "Open up the wards, throw him inside, and seal them again. Those are my orders." "Of course, my duke. There is another matter." "What?" "That of the war." There really isn't a whole lot of war per se in this Warhammer book. It's more limited to skirmishes. There's one other book, and I'm almost gonna read it in front of the camera just to show you how awful it is, and it has nothing to do with war. It's called Blind. Nothing to do with war. This is Warhammer. The war had started with the hunter daemons. They had begun with an audacious first strike, a lesson in superiority. They had probably not intended to kill Vanalator at all, but to teach him that he could be reached anywhere at any time. The Hecatomb was not safe, not from evil as ancient as Aguthrax. Vanalator had called upon the Wrath of Ages, a warrior cult dedicated to self-mutilation and martial excellence, to descend on the stronghold of the 13th Hand. The 13th Hand, since returning from their failure to disrupt Vanalator's armies on Sarthus Majoris, had taken up residence in a huge and filthy tangle of entrail sewers beneath Karnakal. The fanatics of the Wrath of Ages had besieged it, working night by night into the tangle of dried-out organs and sumps of decaying filth, while the shambling vermin of the Hand fought back with poisoned arrows and fiendish traps. Eventually, the Wrath had reached the heart of the fortress, and enacted a ritual that brought back to life the organs that had hung dead for many centuries of Karnakal's lifespan. A few of the Wrath made it out, while the Hand was drowned in filth, or dissolved by digested juices. Their remains were disgorged into the blood canals, silting up the river between Karnakal and Azaldine, a fitting meaningless end for such a lowly cult. An open battle had broken out on the plains between Gal and Gorgath, a dismal and lifeless place. An alliance of cults loyal to Agathrax had fought an army of Scaphalids, all from clans hoping to ascend to Vanalator's service. Vanalator was a savior to them, a prophet of chaos, promising to elevate them above the status of animals. Agathrax won. The Scaphalids were slaughtered, and the many cults took their heads and limbs as evidence of their devotion. A parade reached Gaul, where they presented these body parts to Agathrax. Agathrax appeared to look on their offerings and blessed them with the same disdainful wave of his flabby hand. Jacassi had seen many such wars. In a way, they were a part of its machinery of worship, for the aggressors were ultimately fighting for Khorne's recognition. However, they took place away from the arenas and altars, far from the eyes of Dracassi's lords, filthy shadow wars and rolls of assassinations. Most of Dracassi's lords had reached their positions by eliminating a rival in such a war, and all of them had suffered such aggression from rivals jealous of their position. That was how power worked, aggression and annihilation. Khorne's patronage ensured that on Dracassi, it always took the form of naked violence. Times were different now. Lord Ebondrake's pronouncement had demanded that the lords of Dracassi work together to create a vast army to conquer the worlds for Khorne in the wake of the 13th Black Crusade. That did not allow for open conflict between the lords, and when Ebondrake took his lords to task, The results could be bloodier than any battle they could fight between themselves. This was the matter of the war. Fuck. That's awful. Oh. Yeah, the guy is breaking into the Intrail fortress just to revitalize the limbs and flush out the fucking defenders with digestive juices. That was pretty metal. I like that shit. It's pretty cool. It was so profoundly dark that not even Ulrich's augmented eyesight could pick out anything. It was unnatural. Something was drinking the light away. Ulrich groped out in the darkness. His hand found the floor in front of him. Polished metal. It was the first clean surface Ulrich had touched below the decks of the Hecatomb. In response, there was music. It was quite quiet at first. A strange, flitting sound, mournful but beautiful. The last music Ulrich had heard was the wailing of Azaldine. This was something else. It sounded like 1,000 distant voices. For a moment, he felt that he had intruded on something ancient and sacred, and felt ashamed to be so wounded and flawed in its presence. However, this was the Hecatomb. This was Jakasi. There was nothing beautiful here. Ulrich tried to tell himself that over and over again as the lights began to rise around him. He was in a chamber of gold and silver. Constellations of gemstones twinkled everywhere. The chamber was huge. It must have run the whole length of the ship's nell, and more. Another manipulation of time and space within the ship's asymmetrical pillars, knurled like twisted ropes. Panels of deep blue set into the golden walls were painted with symbols so elegant they glowed as Ulrich looked at them. Bright rivulets of power running through every curve. The whole chamber seemed to shift subtly, rippling in and out, as if in time with some ancient breath. Ulrich stood up, his chest heaved, and he coughed out a clot of blood into the golden floor. Diamonds and sapphires winked up at him through his blood. He had never seen anything like it. It was almost organic, the knots of pillars like ancient tree roots, and the biological forms of the walls and ceiling like a great golden throat. The music was coming from the far end of the chamber. Ulrich took a couple steps towards it. The floor gave out almost imperceptibly beneath his feet, and the pillars curved over him, as if he was inside a vast creature, reacting to his presence. The chamber flared out ahead into a wide, roughly spherical space, dominated by a steeped pyramid, crowned with a great shard of glowing white crystal, from which the song was emanating. More crystal hung from the walls, resonating in time, and filling the chamber with it. At the top of the pyramid, there was a magnificent throne cut from a stone, like a deep blue marble, covered in intricate golden script. A figure stood on the pyramid, wearing a gold-threaded blue robe. Braziers burned with the silver fire, and the song rose to acknowledge Ulrich's presence, the light reaching a near blinding crescendo. Ulrich glimpsed galleries leading off from the pyramid chamber. The place was far bigger than the Hecatomb. For some reason, This was not the least bit surprising to him. The figure stood up. Silver flames licked from inside the hood. Who are you? Ed asked in a voice, dry like the hiss of a snake. Just to call Alric of the Grey Knights, replied Alric. I see. You may kneel. Alric stayed standing. No? Very well. Few of them kneel to begin with. All do, eventually. All of whom? All of you, of course, the slaves, the lowly fed to me. As if I should be grateful, as if, in some compensation for the wretchedness of my station. The figure waved an arm to indicate the blinding glory of the pyramid chamber. You see what I have got to work with here? Alric dearly wanted to wrench the collar of corn from around his neck and let his soul tell him what he was facing. But he had tried that before, and he could not remove it. Not with his bare hands. Not without breaking his neck. So what is it you desire? Desire? Alric paused. There were many things he desired. There was so much anger and misery inside him that he could not separate it all out. I want to escape. No. That is just a primitive lust. A basic thing. A need for freedom. No more elegant than hunger or thirst. No. What do you truly desire? The figure now from the throne took a couple steps down the pyramid. Revenge? Conquest? Redemption? I used to grant wishes, just to call Alric of the Grey Knights. Habits die hard, so they say. They always ask me for something once they realize that. But of course, no desires can be fulfilled here. Not as I am now, unless you desire to have your soul flayed away, which I gather you do not. Many have tried, said Alric. So I see from the state of you. Then this is how it will end. Oh, yes. Alric flexed his fists. He was in no position to fight. He was still exhausted from his battering at the hands of an Alator and struggling against the Scaphids. But no great knight had ever backed down and given himself to the enemy's mercy. I should warn you, I am not an easy man to kill. Kill? Just to call Alric, I thought you would have more brains and that scarred head than that. You and I are much alike. And that Vanalator has uses for us. Aside from pitting out our skulls on his god's throne, no. He does not want you to be killed. Alric pulled his hood back. The figure pulled his hood back. Beneath was a face of a man, flayed of skin. The silver threads for muscles. Silver flame ripped over it. His eyes were points of burning blue. Tiny mouths opened, and its flesh, muttering syllables of spells that cast a corona of power over it. He wants you possessed, said Razael the Cunning. You know, I did feel I felt as if Zainch's eye was upon me when I read about, because I do sometimes wear that thing behind me as a cloak. It's very similar to Razael's cloak, but the thing about Zainch, thing about him, is every time I have prayed to him, I've been met with abysmal failure. So you can only use him as a weapon. See? Look at that. By merely mentioning his name, I just took a fucking load. If I had a fucking superpower, it would be two superpowers. I would need both of them. Otherwise, it would just be a power. And I mean, both of these things are pretty. They're pretty doable, but almost impossible. And that would be always having like the ability to create just a tiny little flame. Like basically, like always being able to have a lighter, and then also always being able to have an auxiliary cord. If I did, I seriously like, I would be unstoppable if I just had that. But look, I mean, they go missing. Okay, everyone wants an auxiliary cord. Everyone wants a fucking lighter. It is like it's impossible for me to have more than 2 or 3 lighters at a time. I don't think I've ever owned 4 lighters. Like I don't even dare try. I don't even dare try it because it would just go missing in front of me, and that would be look. That would be too much for me to fucking handle for sure. It would be no, my mind. That would be it. That would be the final fucking spit, and spit in the spittoon bucket, right? Duke Venaltor watched the battle from his quarters, the bloody events shimmering on a great sheet of crystal that dominated one wall of his audience chamber. "Let me see the scourge," said Venaltor. The image shifted to display Dracassi's newest city. The scourge was a collection of ships and Flotsam roped together in a gigantic conglomeration of wreckage floating on the planet's southern ocean, where millions of outcasts and heretics lived. Rumors persist that the hecatomb had been cut from the scourge, and that perhaps it was the very first ship to become a part of it, and therefore sails as the excised heart of a dead city. But Altor did nothing to deny such rumors. The scourge was the link between the surface of Jacassi and the civilizations of its depths. Creatures evolved from scaphalids lived there, along with lords of Jacassi, like Thurgo, the Tentacular, who forged their domains away from the eyes of the surface. Ocean-going mutants crawled from the sea to kill and abduct, drowning the inhabitants of a great temple ship that dominated the outskirts of the Scourge. The temple was dedicated to Argothrax, ministered by his daimonic priesthood, and the mutants were creatures with gills and webbed hands, for whom answered Venaltor's call for allies from the deeps. Argothrax's priests, each with 6 fingers on their mutated hands, were dragged down and killed. The splendid temple ship was hauled below the waterline and began to sink, dragging the dwellings of many outcasts down with it. Icons of the warp toppled into the foul waters. The image shifted. This time it showed a staging ground for one of Venaltor's allied cults, and the Ebon Hand, a band of pirates corrupted and turned to corn by Venaltor's agents. They were assembling high in the mountain roosts, where they had docked their skyships and dirigibles, ready to marshal their numbers and join Ebondrake's off-world crusade. The Ebon Hand sentries alerted the whole cult, and the sun broke over the mountain. On the flagpole, at the center of their assembly ground, where once had flown a banner blessed by Venaltor himself, now hung the body of their leader, Gariagan, Red Hand. Red Hand's face had been removed, and a huge bloody maw yawned in the front of his head. His hands had been cut off too, no doubt added to the trophies of whatever assassin Argothrax had sent. "The war continues then, my lord," said the slave master. The ancient scaphalid waited patiently at the back of the room. It was a shrewd creature. It had survived as long as it did by aligning itself with Jakassi's lords and offering them with complete subservience. "It continues," said Venaltor. "It will not end until one of us is dead." "Then how will we be victorious?" Venaltor looked at him. "I will sacrifice everything I have to, and nothing more." Lord Ebondrake must be guarded against. A dull mind would think so, slave master. But the truth is that Ebondrake admires strength, as we all do. When Agathrax is done, I will be closer to Ebondrake's position, not further away. Then what is your will? The slave master crouched down on its haunches. It was the equivalent of a deep bow, which a scaphlid could not do normally since it was so hunched over. Keep it quiet, said Vanalator, for now. You soldiers, we can say, were acting on their own, and that we will not miss. Kill Agathrax's outer circles first, the allies of allies, the props holding up his domain. He is a thing of anger and hate. He will try to strike at me as directly as possible. He will elicit Ebondrake's wrath before I do. And when that happens, I will be open for the death blow. He will be open for the death blow. So it shall be, my lord. Keep me updated on the Grey Knights, added Vanalator. Once Raziel has him, he is destined to kill Agathrax. Of course! The slave master left the chamber to pursue his many duties, leaving Vanalator watching the Shadow War unfolding. Incoherency level, rating nearly 45%. Slur level, slurs detected, minimal slurring detected. No, buddy. Alric slammed into the wall behind him. Shards of gold showered down around him as he slid to the floor. His mind reeled. Images of the demon's life battered against him like gunfire. He forced himself to breathe and to ground his thoughts, to fight the flawed human instinct to run. Raziel the Cunning was flying above him. Silver wings unfolded from his robes. Fire rippled up off his body, and hundreds of mouths and its shining flesh sing at once. You know I can give you what you desire, said Raziel, in 100 voices. You are stronger than the others. You believe that you can see through the lie. Perhaps you are right. Aura got to his feet. He felt weak and small. Never had he been so at the mercy of another creature. Do you desire death, Grey Knight? Asked Raziel. I can give you that. Alric forced the breath down. He was a Grey Knight. He had faced the lies of chaos before and thrown them back into the darkness with the power of truth. Demons had tried to possess him before, too, and not one of them had prized open his mind. However, none of them had ever attacked him while he was so unprotected. I desire freedom, said Alric. Then you can have it. Freedom from you. Raziel cocked his head to the side. Its burning eyes looked at him quizzically, as it might have regarded a particularly unusual kind of lunatic. That, it said, is something you will have to take from me. A hand coalesced from golden energy, picked Alric up, and held him against the wall, Power was pouring off Rizeo, burning from the crystals and turning from the golden walls into sheets of molten light. Alric fought back, feeling the hand closing around his mind. Dull pain throbbed behind his eyes. I will wear your flesh and leave this prison, Justicar Alric. I will escape this world and become one with my god. That is what I desire. That is what Venalator has offered me by sending you here. For even the blood god's servants must perpetuate the lie. Alric fought back with everything he had. It took all his remaining strength just to draw a breath, but he would not let Raziel in. Never! He would die first. That would be his last service to the Emperor. The enemy would never have a possessed Grey Knight to parade around before its armies. Never! Unless Raziel was stronger. Raziel's burning face floated down low above Alric's. A silver hand reached out to touch his head. Alric was filled with cold pain. Raziel was showing him what he could do to him. Fill him up with agony, 1,000 times worse. For 1,000 years, he was telling Alric to give in. Not this mind, hissed Alric behind his teeth. There is no pain. There is no pain save the fibers of failure. There is no torture save a duty undone. My emperor claims me, and no other may challenge. Raziel dropped Alric. The condition of your soul matters not, he said. I will flay it alive if I have to. Alric tried to get back to his feet. Raziel threw horrors at him. Rotting bodies loomed from the floor and walls. Alric had seen thousands of corpses. They would not force him to his knees. They took on the faces of his friends, his battle brothers, and everyone he had ever trusted. Alric had lost many friends. The penalty for being trusted by Alric seemed to be death. He felt this might tighten. He felt his might tighten as it recoiled from the images. But he held firm. Worlds burned, a galaxy suffered, and the stars went out. Hollow laughter filled the universe. Alric fought back. Victory after victory bloomed into existence. He knew that chaos could be defeated. Perhaps it would take all the time in the galaxy, but it would happen. From every vision of desolation Raziel pumped to his mind, Alric countered with something glorious. The destruction of the Chaos Fleet at the battle of Gesami. Lord Solar Machirius, winning 1,000 worlds back from the galaxy's dark. The vanquishing of Angron and the First Armageddon War. Alric pulled victories from every history book and inspiration from every sermon he knew. We are weak flesh and fools, thought Alric furiously. We are young and blind. Perhaps one day we will be gone, but we will burn so bright, and the galaxy, which has forgotten so much, will remember us. Raziel hissed in frustration. The images of horror dissolved away. Alric slumped down against the wall of the chamber, grinning like a madman. You can't terrify me into submission, demon. I am a space marine. We know no fear. Then it seems you are in need, spat Raziel, of an education. Raziel's mind picked Alric up off the floor. Alric fought back as Raziel drifted closer on wings of light and placed a hand on Alric's forehead. Filaments of silver and gold were woven around Alric's head and wormed into the skin of his scalp. Alric bellowed and tried to tear them free, but they were inside him now. He could feel them writhing through his skull into his brain. Synapses misfired, and extremes of heat and cold rippled over him. Nausea, pain, confusion. The world spun around him as his sense of balance went haywire. He beat at Raziel's body with his free hand. Silver ribs crunched. It would not be enough. 1,000 mouths were laughing at him. Auric's consciousness melted like the gold. Even when Argothrax was young, Rosella Cunning had granted wishes. The images in Auric's mind, the image in Auric's mind was of a largely formless thing, just a scrawl of psychic matter in the warp. He knew it was a simplified image, distorted by being forced into a human mind. The scale of the warp still battered at Auric's brain. The youthful demon, little more than a tadpole swimming through the mindless infinity of the warp, had sucked on the misery and hatred of the young races populating the universe. From them he learned deceit and malice, and saw their fleeting joys and moments of affection as the hollow things they really were. The living things of the galaxy were nothing but bundles of lies woven to keep them from understanding their hateful natures. Lies were the fabric of the mind. To the mortal races, lies were reality. The power of a lie could bring empires up from the dirt and cast them back down again. They could drive men, greenskins, Eldar, and the rest to acts of heroism and devotion, and of hatred and genocide and evil. Lies were power. Deceit was reality. There was a god of lies in the warp. There could be no greater power. Congealed from the deceit of the universe, older than reality, Raziel could only become a part of it. It was ancient, and yet it was nothing, for this purest manifestation of chaos was so infinitely mutatable that it could never truly be fixed as anything. Its very existence was a lie, because Zange could not exist. From this paradox flowed such power that the universe could only have one rightful ruler, and it was Zange. The concept of Zange was an appalling thing, one that filled Ulrich with disgust. But Raziel's devotion to the being mingled with that disgust, the resulting emotion utterly alien to Ulrich's mind, a perversion of everything it meant to be human. Raziel's understanding grew. Zange desired power, and yet Zange also desired an abundance of power, anarchy and confusion, because for Zange, to desire any one thing would be to deny its very existence. There were other gods in the warp. One of them was Korn, the blood god. But Raziel knew that only Zange could draw its power from such a fundamental part of the universe as the lie. And so Raziel served. Raziel found ways through into real space where the young races dwelled. He found a way through unprotected minds and naked souls of the Psychers so bright from the warp that Raziel could cross the bridge between dimension and possession. He did Zange's work, both encouraging others to worship the liar god and build his power base, but also casting down the structures of power wherever he found them, spreading chaos and anarchy, for only Zange could desire both domination and chaos at once. Sometimes he even fought over the other followers of Zange to ensure that the holy paradox did not falter. The time roared by like a hurricane in Auric's mind. He fought to keep himself from being shredded by the force of Raziel's memories, because then he would disappear completely and be left nothing but a figment of the demon's imagination. Cults of Zange prayed for help. Sometimes Zange really did help them. Other times he sent them Raziel. There were cults who called for Zange's servants and opened the gates through which Raziel could pass, his own sacred form emerging into real space, and all its terrifying silver magnificence. Everyone who worshipped Zange eventually suffered for it, because Zange promised deliverance and succor. And so it was inevitable that this would always be a lie. Raziel was often the source of that suffering. Here, an assassin, and there a puppet master, orchestrating tragic downfalls with an attention to detail that a human mind could not comprehend. Whole empires were shifted and manipulated to bring a single person low, and the lowliest of individuals could be used to topple civilizations with only the slightest touch. Rizal lied. He made promises. He became an expert at seeking out the desires of those who called out to Zange and fulfilling them in such a way that they became utterly damned. They always came to recognize the lie just before the end and knew that immediately that it had not been Zange, but they who had damned themselves. Yet another paradox. Rizal was good at what he did. Aeons passed, species rose and fell. Of course, mankind had far from the greatest potential. One species ruled the galaxy, and then another. Believers in the lie that true power lay somewhere in real space. The time came when mankind rose to dominate the galaxy in what it called the Dark Age of Technology, and then fell again in the wars of the Age of Strife. It was not until the most spectacular collapse, though it proved plenty of fuel for Zanch's silver fires, but it was different because mankind came back. One of them rose on Terra, humanity's birthplace, and began to unite what remained of the species. He was nearly succeeded, this emperor, but his power too was just a hollow lie compared to that of the warp. Forces in the warp played their hand and tried to use this new unification of humanity to seize control of it, and with it the material galaxy. Sage played his part too. The Emperor was a lie, and Sage took great pleasure in revealing it to those who rebelled against him. Rizal was there at Prospero and Estevan V. He was even there on Terra when the final charades were played out. When in victory, the Emperor condemned his species to 10,000 years and more of lightless misery. Rizal observed much of the Horus heresy, reporting back to the demon princes of Zange, or whispering promises of power and deliverance, much as it had always done. When the traitor forces retreated into the Eye of Terror, Rizal knew it was just another lie. Chaos was not gone from the galaxy. When they returned and ruled, the age of the Imperium would seem barely a flicker in the galaxy's history. Then something went wrong. The heresy was so pure that it almost filled up Alric. He had to tell himself over and over again that Rizal was a demon and that everything he saw in it was a lie. Alric recognized the blood-stained world that Rizal came to next. An 8-pointed star was carved into its surface, forming canals of blood. The star connected its great cities, a crown of crystal spires, a great parasite, and an endless slum. Rizal came to the world of Chakasi, where many threads of fate converged. There, titanic demons had fought in the past, drenching the planet with the blood that still stained it. Khorne had won, and for the first time Rizal the Cunning was trapped. Khorne despised the lie, despised fate and magic and everything that made up Zange. Rizal was cut off from the warp. He lived there for 1,000 years, snatching tragedies from the blood-soaked lives of Khorne's servants, promising more bloodshed, and then robbing them of their minds. Khorne's own demons hunted him, but they were base creatures, and more often than not, they consumed each other in their lust for blood, turned against their fellows by Rizal's brilliance. Rizal the Cunning was the most hated creature on Jakassi, but most hated world. Then Duke Venalator arose, an aspiring champion of the blood god. He was a master swordsman and an ambitious general. He sought out Rizal the Cunning, as many lords and champions had done before, and as always, Rizal asked what Venalator desired. Venalator said he wanted a worthy opponent. The art of the sword was his personal form of worship, and he needed a fitting target to perfect his skills. Rizal offered him the best of Jakazi's fighters, knowing that in besting them, Venalator would either kill himself or driven mad by victory or defeat. However, Venalator killed everything put in front of him. Finally, Rizal, knowing that the lie had to be believed no matter what, offered himself. up as an opponent, knowing that the silver fires of Zange burned brightly in him, and that no mortal could best him. The Nalator cut Raziel so deeply that the demon knew fear for the briefest of moments. Then he glimpsed the warp again, and the many faces of his lord Zange laughing at him. Raziel had been lied to as well! Of course he had! It was all part of the divine paradox. Raziel collapsed, defeated, but Venalator did not dispatch him. Instead, he was taken to the Hecatomb, imprisoned beyond the doors, marked with the most powerful anti-magical wards, and bound by the ancient demon oaths to accept Venalator as his conqueror and master. Then, centuries later, just the god Alric of the Grey Knights was thrown into his cell. All this information was blasted into Alric's mind in less than a second. Mind blast. Jimmy Neutron, mind blast.